Drone strikes killed 12 civilians in Kidal.
Portuguese Prime Minister Costa resigned.
There's no post-war Israeli occupation of Gaza.
Washington pulls out of Europe a post-war treaty after Russia.
Court rules indefinite immigration unlawful.
In northern Mali on Tuesday, including on a base vacated days earlier by a United Nations peacekeeping mission, a local official and a rebel group said. The strikes appear to be the first sign of conflict in Kidal, a stronghold of ethnic Tuareg rebels. Since the UN left in a hurry in October 31st, part of its wider withdrawal from the West African country as security worsens. Security experts warn the area could now become the epicenter of a war over the north as the rebels and the army seek to take areas that the UN vacates, further destabilizing Mali, where Islamist militants linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State also roam. A local official, Ahmuddin Ekamse, said between 12 and 15 civilian deaths had been reported on Tuesday's strike, and that one of the drones fell near a school. A spokesperson of the rebel movement, the Permanent Strategic Framework for Peace, Security and Development, said 3 people died. The rebel spokesperson blamed the army and Russian mercenaries that work with Mali's military authority. There were 3 drone strikes on the former UN base, and one hit a group of children that were collecting objects from the camp. Elmalad Ramadan said via telephone. He said the second fell near an airfield and struck civilians while the third missed its target. Mali's army did not respond to requests for comment. Released a statement on X later Tuesday saying it had carried out strikes on the camp in Kidal. The Kenyan government announced Monday a surprise public holiday on November 13th for a 19 billion trees.
United States President Joe Biden came during an unannounced visit to Beirut to discuss the volatile situation with Lebanon's parliament speaker and caretaker prime minister. Washington told reporters after meeting Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri that restoring calm along Lebanon's southern border is of utmost importance. Washington said he heard Berri's concerns over the tensions along the Lebanon-Israel border, where fighters of the militant group Hezbollah and their allies have been exchanging fire with Israeli troops for about a month after the Israel-Hamas war started on October 7th. Washington's comments came after the Israeli military and Hezbollah exchanged fire on Tuesday, following what Israel said was a targeting of one of its posts along the Lebanese border. The clashes along the border have intensified since Israel launched a ground incursion into Gaza against Palestinian military group Hamas, an ally of Hezbollah.
Hamas spokesman Ghazi Hamad, speaking on Tuesday from Beirut, denied that Israeli forces were making any significant military gains or that they had advanced deep into Gaza City. They never gave the people the truth, Hamad said. He added that numerous Israeli soldiers were killed on Monday and many tanks were destroyed. Today, and 5,500 babies have been born since the October 7 Hamas attacks on Israel. Dr. Natalia Kanem, being in a hospital is essential for cesarean section deliveries. While a truckload of health and delivery kits and medication have arrived in Gaza, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the needs, said Kanem, the executive director of the UN
which killed one of them to call for the release of their loved ones.
Israelis observed a minute of silence on Tuesday morning in memory of the victims of Hamas' October 7 attack on southern Israel and the 348 soldiers killed since the assault. On its 1-month anniversary, Israelis are making the anniversary as a day of mourning over the attack, in which more than 1,400 people were killed and 242 were taken hostage. The 1-month anniversary is a milestone in the timeline of Jewish mourning. Memorial events are scheduled to be held in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem later in the day.
Hundreds of family members of hostages held in Gaza joined supporters behind beside the Western Wall in Jerusalem to call for the release of their loved ones. Tuesday's evening event was one of the several held around Israel to mark 1 month since the unprecedented October 7 Hamas attack, in which more than 1,400 people were killed and around 240 taken captive. The hostages have been on the ground in Gaza for 32 days. I cry out to every single person here and every single person on the planet to make it your mission to free their souls. Free their souls, Rachel Goldberg, a prominent spokesperson for the hostage family, said, his voice breaking. Singing and praying together while holding signs of the kidnapped parents and friends gave speeches calling for the release. They also lit a memorial flame that will be carried across the world to build political pressure to aid their release.
Militants targeted the U.S. military base in Erbil, Iraq, overnight and again Tuesday morning, but caused no injuries to personnel and damage to the infrastructure. A U.S. defense official. Commercial flights were briefly suspended. The strikes are part of an ongoing string of attacks in recent weeks by the Iran-backed militants on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, in light of Washington's support for Israel's war on Hamas. The attacks bring the total number of strikes on U.S. and coalition facilities in Iraq and Syria to at least 40 since October 17th. The Islamic resistance also claimed a responsibility for other attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria on Tuesday, including a drone attack on Al-Harar in Erbil province and on the Green Village base in eastern Syria. The U.S. defense officials said there were no reports of attacks at Al-Harar. You're watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We will be back after this break.
7 leading industries democracy to forget consensus and how to deal with the crisis. As he and his G7 counterparts began 2 days of talks in Japan, Blinken said it was critically important for the group to show unity as has over Russia's war to Ukraine and other major issues and prevent existing differences of Gaza from deepening. Minister Yoko Kamikawa. The devastating month-long conflict in Gaza and efforts to ease the dire humanitarian impacts of Israel's response to the deadly October 7 Hamas attack will be a major focus of the meeting. Yet, with the Russia-Ukraine war fears North Korea may be readying a new nuclear test and concerns about China's increasing global assertiveness, it is far from the only crisis on the agenda.
The Islamic State on Tuesday claimed responsibility for the attack on a passenger bus in Kabul, the group's Telegram account said. At least 7 people were killed and an explosion.
SC said the quake was originally pegged at 5.5 magnitude with a depth of 8 kilometers, but later downgraded to a magnitude of 4.8 by EMSC.
Government-backed hackers tried to plant spyware made by NSO group on the iPhone of an Indian journalist working for the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project in August, the organization's co-founder said on Monday. The OCCRP's co-founder Drew Sullivan told reporters the journalist Anand Mangnell was among a series of people in India who received alerts from Apple last week warning them that they had been targeted by state-sponsored hackers trying to remotely access their iPhones. Apple's alerts did not identify the government behind the hacks or the spyware used. Sullivan said an internal forensic investigation tied the intrusion efforts against Magnell's phone to Israeli's firm NSO's Pegasus hacking tool. The spyware allows hackers sweeping access to the target's smartphones, allowing them to record calls, intercept messages, and transform the phones into portable listening devices. Use of the tool on Magnell's phone was unacceptable and outrageous, Sullivan said. Whatever government is spying on the reporters, there is no plausible explanation for that other than political gain, Sullivan said. OCCRP, a global network of investigative journalists, is known for its sweeping, document-based exposes of corruption and organized crime. Magnell, who reports on corporate fraud and government corruption, wasn't immediately available for comment. A company that did forensic work, OCCRP, on Magnell's device, an anti-phone hacking firm called iVerify, said if found a pattern of suspicious crashes on it that matched the previously known Pegasus intrusions, we're happy to say with high confidence that his iPhone was attacked with Pegasus. iVerify co-founder Rocky Cole said. The NSO group said in an email that it had seen the pattern of organizations going to the media without conclusive findings, but didn't comment on OCCRP's findings. Apple's recent round of alerts reached more than 20 people in India, most of them opposition politicians, igniting a fresh storm of allegations that New Delhi is using hacking tools against its own citizens just months before a national Indian election is slated to begin. The Indian government has denied such allegations, and last week Information Technology Minister Ashwari on the status of the government's investigation into the hacking alerts.
Indian authorities have barred any solidarity protests in Muslim-majority Kashmir and asked Muslim preachers not to mention the conflict in their sermons, residents and religious leaders told the press. The restrictions are part of Indians' effort to curb any form of protest that could turn into demand for ending New Delhi's rule in the disputed region. They also reflect a shift in India's foreign policy under populist Prime Minister Narendra Modi away from its long-held support for the Palestinians, analysts say. India has long walked a tightrope between the warring sides with historically close ties to both, while India strongly condemned the October 7 attack by the militant group Hamas and expressed solidarity with Israel. It urged that international humanitarian law be upheld in Gaza amid rising civilian deaths. Anti-Indian sentiment run deep in the Himalayan region, which is divided between India and Pakistan and claimed by both in its entirety. In 2019, New Delhi removed the region's semi-autonomy, drastically curbing any form of dissent, civil liberties, and media freedoms. Kashmiris have long shown strong solidarity with the Palestinian and often staged large anti-Israel protests during previous fighting in Gaza. Those protests often turned into street clashes with demands for an end of India's rule and dozens of casualties. Modi, a staunch Hindu nationalist, was one of the first global leaders to swiftly express solidarity with Israel and call the Hamas attack terrorism. However, on October 12th, India's foreign ministry issued a statement reiterating New Delhi's position in support of establishing a sovereign, independent, and viable state of Palestine, living within secure and recognized borders, side by side at peace with Israel.
Dozens of Filipinos fled from the war-ravaged Gaza Strip into Egypt through the Rafah crossing after diplomats negotiated for their safe passage and Marcos Jr. said Wednesday the 40 Filipinos were traveling to the Egyptian capital of Cairo, where they plan to take flights back to the Philippines. Marcos said in a video message in Manila, 2 Filipino doctors managed to leave the Gaza Strip into Egypt last week. I hope the rest of our countrymen who also wanted to return home can also exit properly with their spouses and loved ones, Marcus said. Most of at least 134 Filipinos in Gaza, many of whom are married to Palestinians, have sought out to leave the besieged territory and are waiting for an opportunity to leave. Sought help to leave the besieged territory and are waiting for an opportunity to leave. The Department of Foreign Affairs in Manila said Hamas militants rampaged in southern Israel on October 7th, which sparked a war between Israel and Hamas. Before the war began, about 30,000 Filipinos were living and working in Israel, many as caregivers who look after the elderly, the ill, and those with physical disabilities, according to the Philippines Foreign Ministry. The huge income they send back home has helped keep the country's fragile economy afloat. The Philippines is a major source of manual labor worldwide.
The Chief Justice of Indonesia's top court was dismissed from the post after an ethics council found him guilty Tuesday of making last-minute election candidacy requirements. Constitutional Court Chief Justice Anwar Usman committed the ethical violation that cleared the way for President Joko Widodo's eldest son to run for vice president next year. Ashidik, the chief of the court's honorary council, known also as the Ethics Council, said it was the majority's decision. Usman was proven to have committed a serious violation of the codes of ethics and behavior of constitutional justices by violating the principles of impartiality, integrity, competence, equality, independence, appropriateness, and decency, Ashidik said. The ruling came less than a month after the Constitutional Court, in a 5-4 decision, carved out an exception to the minimum age requirement of 40 for presidential and vice presidential candidates, allowing the president's son, Gibran Rakabeming Raka, 36, to seek the post. Various organizations and rights activists challenged the court's October 16 decision. The majority reported Usman for alleged ethics breaches on the grounds that he should have recused himself from hearing candidacy petitions to avoid conflicts in interest since Raka is his nephew by marriage. The three-judge ethics panel removed Usman as Chief Justice but allowed him to remain on the court under certain conditions. The panel banned him from being involved when the court adjudicates
The military-run Southeast Asian nation of Myanmar is holding its first joint naval exercise with Russia. State media reported Tuesday, with the countries carrying out maneuvers in the Andaman Sea. Reports in the state-run Global New Light of Myanmar newspaper said that the maritime security exercise with Russia was being held until Thursday, 157 kilometers west of Myaik in Myanmar's far south. Some Russian Navy vessels sailed from Yangon to take part, press reported. The three-day joint drill involves aircraft and naval vessels and focuses on defending against threats from air, sea, and land, as well as all the maritime security measures, the report said. Russia is a major supporter and arms supplier of Myanmar's military government, which was installed after the army seized power and ousted the elected government of Kyi in February 2021. Russia defends Myanmar's military government in international forums, and the ruling generals return the favor by generally supporting Moscow's foreign policy agenda. Myanmar has been treated as a pariah state by many Western nations since the military takeover and the violent suppression of protests against it, which has led to the deaths of thousands of civilians and given rise to an armed resistance movement in many parts of the country. The Global New Light of Myanmar said the head of the military government, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, met on Monday with Admiral Nikolai Yevmenov, the commander-in-chief of Russia's Navy, at Taiwa port in the southern part of Yangon. The Russian officer welcomed an inspection by the Myanmar leader, who reviewed a guard of honor and toward one of the Russian vessels. Min Aung Hlaing was briefed on the capacity of the Russian weapons, the installation of modern systems, and an anti-submarine helicopter, the report said. Tom Andrews, the UN independent investigator on human rights in Myanmar, in a report in May to the Geneva-based Human Rights Council, identified as $406 million in weapon and material that went to the Myanmar military from Russia, $267 million from China, $254 million from Singapore, $51 million from India, and $28 million from Thailand. Since the 28 Russian private and state-owned companies have transferred fighter jets and their spare parts, advanced missile systems, reconnaissance and attack drones, attack helicopters, and other systems to Myanmar military. As an example of what he called the military's brutality, Andrews pointed to its April 11 airstrike using a Russian 130 fighter jets on a ceremony in northern Myanmar, attended by some 300 opponents of army rule. It was quickly followed by an attack by Russia Mi-35 helicopters and those who came to help. He said at least 160 people were killed, including many children. The joint exercises come at a time when Myanmar's military is facing the coordinated offensives of the pro-democracy resistance fighters and minority armed organizations that have seized strategic towns in the northern region of Sagaing and Shan State in the east. Russian-made fighter jets are used in attacks on both the resistance fighters and ethnic armed groups.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky late Monday ruled out holding a presidential vote in the spring and urged his countrymen to avoid political election. The country would need to amend the law if it decided to hold the vote. Zelensky, who
the top aide to General Valeriy Zalkin was killed by a grenade given to him as a gift for his 39th birthday. Some suspected targeted attack, but Executive Minister He said Chastyakov was showing off the grenades to his family at home when his son took one and began twisting the ring. The serviceman then took the grenade from the child and pulled the ring, leading to a tragic explosion, Klimenko said. The officer's death was the second fatal tragedy in less than a week for Ukraine's military. A Ukrainian brigade holding a ceremony in Zaporizhia to honor troops on Friday was struck by a Russian missile that killed 19 soldiers, one of the deadliest single attacks reported by Ukrainian forces. The commander of the 128th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade, Metro Lysyk, was suspended, and authorities investigate why the rocket forces and artillery day event was held near the front line, where Russian reconnaissance drones could easily spot the gathering. Ukrainian media reported that Lysyk was